So a close friend of mine recently asked me about archetypes and whether I could speak something to try and elucidate what archetypes are and how they have meaning in our lives. So I thought I'd talk about that a little bit. One thing to help understand it is I have a way of looking at the world through a lens which I call the Corpus Christi. And the Corpus Christi is a science of of our higher reality, of our subtle bodies. So we have the physical body, and then I grade them: emotional body or astral body, mental body, which is the mind, and then the causal body, and then beyond that, the Buddhic, Atmic, and monadic bodies. Right. So they're like layers, and as you ascend in understanding through those layers, your embodiment of the unified consciousness of all that is expands. And there are relationships within that framework. What's really important to understand about archetypes is that they lie beyond our feelings and beyond our mind, but they interpenetrate both. So really they're the domain of what I call the causal plane. So if you think of like the emotional body, the emotional plane, our emotions, our feeling life, our desires, and then just beyond that, at a subtler level, is thought, the world of thought, thinking. And obviously those interpenetrate as well, because the way you think, and the way you feel are interconnected. But thought is seen generally as a subtler vibration. And then even within the field of thought, there are denser thought patterns and then subtler thought patterns. And so there's a grading within each plane, same with the emotional plane. The causal plane, between each of these planes is a threshold, right? So there's a threshold where emotion and thought are transcended, included, and then, transcended in the causal plane. And the causal plane is this plane, this dimension in which the archetypes live and kind of float. And the archetypes are, the way I see it, as they are coalescing of the collective consciousness of all beings, but humanity, let's say. They're our thought patterns, they're our beliefs, they're our ideals, and they exist on that plane of reality. But underneath that plane is the understanding that everything is just light. You reduce everything to light. You can't, everything, right? So you can't see that from the mental plane, right? In the mental plane, you can generally, your thoughts, even though your thoughts might be quite interdimensional and quite advanced, you can have a thought about the unity of consciousness, but an actual experience of it is different. And on the causal plane, you experience it, you remember it, because you inhabit it both not just through intellectual understanding, but beyond that in knowing. And knowing is beyond intellectual understanding, and it's beyond just feeling as well, although it contains both. And this is what an archetype is. An archetype is, it's kind of like a lens that gives you a view into the holographic, interdimensional cosmos. So let's give an example. Like, I went for a walk this morning. It was a beautiful morning at dawn. And I looked up and I saw two doves sitting in the sunlight, just looking at each other on a telegraph line. It was like, wow, isn't that beautiful? Two doves. And that's an archetype at some level, because two doves symbolically are about love. There always have been. Humans have like doves. Yeah, dove of peace, the dove of love. It seems to sound like love, dove, love. So there's two of them. And so two doves is also a symbol of like perfect love, sitting there in the dawn, right? That's an archetype, right? But you could just look at the doves and go, well, they're two doves. I can shoot them, dissect them, and see that they're just made of matter. It's kind of, or I can look through a poet's eyes and write a poem about those doves and how they represent like this cosmic love between yin and yang, and all of that. And you can go there. That is, where poetry and music comes, it touches the causal plane. It downloads those highest forms of human aspiration, just touch the causal plane. They download the archetype. So music, poetry, dance, those higher cultural forms, they begin to touch that threshold of the causal. The highest intellectual thought doesn't get beyond. There's a kind of ring, a pass knot, like a kind of veil where the logical mind cannot penetrate any further. You have to let go of the mind and, to enter into the higher mind of the causal plane. It's a form of higher thinking, but it's knowing, it's imbued with knowing. So it's a very high state of consciousness. You may access it through deep insights. That's how the causal plane comes into humans, through deep epiphanies, insights, breakthroughs, like sudden rushes of knowing that come down into our physical, into our emotional body, into our mental body. We suddenly and it's more akin to memory. And there are so many archetypes. The archetypes all interlock, because they are the fundamental truths encoded through these different lenses that humans have picked up. And even within the archetypal world, they're not all pretty, You have all of the whole spectrum. So you can take like an archetype of, let's think about like our film industry, the book industry, the writing, all of it. It's all based on the decoding of archetypes. So take the horror genre, right? Think about horror films, if you've ever seen one, I don't know, but the figure of a vampire, what is a vampire? It's an archetype, right? Where's it come from? It's an archetype. It's been there forever because it's a certain behavior. It's a certain pattern. Like the vampire represents something that our mind can't fully grasp. And yet we experience sometimes vampire behavior from others. Maybe we even exhibit it ourselves, like where we kind of latch onto something and we won't let go and we're trying to suck the blood out of it, and it's a selfish view in that sense. But those archetypes, they all exist on that plane as well. All the fear, shadow, what Jung called Jung was the great, one of the great kind of exponents of the archetype. He kind of coined the term, and Plato going further back. And there have been many great thinkers who've explored this. But Jung particularly saw these as coming from the collective consciousness. So even the shadow archetypes, as he called them, are also archetypes. But viewed from the causal plane, they're not imbued with, you don't identify with them. Like if they're experienced on the emotional plane, the astral plane, you identify with it. You think that vampire is coming to get you. So you have a dream, in your astral body at night, and that vampire is after you, and you believe that you're separate from it. On the causal plane, you don't experience that. You know that it's an archetype. You know that it's a fractal aspect of truth. You know it. And you know that you can't distinguish it from a heightened aspect of truth. So you might take you might see Jesus floating on the clouds. That's another archetype, right? But you wouldn't discriminate because they both are made of light. They're both at their core, they're both experiences of the collective consciousness. Crystals, crystals of consciousness in a way, like floating in this plane, this dimension. So seeing things from the causal plane is very precious. It's a real quantum leap for humans because it means we no longer identify with the dramas of the world. There are all these people that believe that there are men in black or some kind of dark cabal who's controlling the world, who's trying to take away our freedom and our power. And there may be some truth to that. But seen from the causal plane, such conspiracies are not identified with, because you realize that they're all facets of the Maya, of this illusory drama, this theater that we're involved in. All of it, and then you don't get caught in the good and evil game, right? You can enjoy the good and evil game because we are in a good and evil game, right? but you don't get caught in it. You don't have to like go, well, I'm fighting for justice, right? Which is a great and noble thing. But if you identify entirely with like being the good guy or the, then you're making the evil guy evil, and you are kind of lost in your own machinations. So seeing things from this higher plane means that you no longer are so attached with your own frame of reference. You begin to appreciate the patterns of life and nature, and archetypes are everywhere. It's just a matter of decoding them. And once we begin to decode them and we realize that we are enmeshed in them, many of us like are lost in them, right? And that's the beauty, is like, if you might ask, like, how do I do this? How do I get to the causal plane? Deep contemplation. You have to really be courageous, because you have to contemplate something about yourself, the way you're seeing something, any discomfort. And you have to really take a really long, honest look at yourself. But if you go into deep contemplation or meditation for periods of time, you'll begin to see these things. They will begin to naturally flower inside you, because these insights will drop in. That's why I teach the art of contemplation, and the art of contemplation is about creating pauses in your life. And if you don't create these pauses, there's no spaciousness for these insights to drop in. Because we need to kind of filter these things, first of all, through our mind, and through our feelings. We think about them, we feel our way into them. So if you have a bad dream or something, or a good dream, you contemplate that. And you don't give up. You go on contemplating it until the penny drops and you have the insight. So there might be some great mystery in your life that you don't understand. Maybe it's like your relationships, maybe it's your health, maybe it's all kinds of things, right? And you're like, I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to understand why this is happening to me. You contemplate it. And over a period of time, if you stay without tension, the penny will drop. That causal plane will open up. It will open up at the oddest time. It might be triggered by something someone says, or an event, or in a dream, or it's at the most unexpected time the penny drops, and suddenly the skies open, and you see, you see from that causal level, and you suddenly realize, I've just gained myself a little bit of freedom, a lot of freedom actually, because you're no longer so possessed by an archetype. You're now seeing it just as, it is made of light. Even if it's a really dark, sinister one, it's made of light. You don't discriminate between the good and the bad, between good and evil. And therefore, you can be in a deep state of trust in your own life. And really, our lives are the decoding of archetypes. And you see, beyond the causal plane lies the Buddhic plane. And the Buddhic plane doesn't deal in archetypes. It's the pure light, undifferentiated, coming through the heart center. Right? So the Buddhic plane is only about feelings of exalted ecstasy. That's what you feel. It doesn't form an image, the Buddhic plane. When it comes to the causal, it starts to form a kind of image. But that image is not just visual. It's impregnated with feeling as well, and texture and color and memory and shape. So the images aren't just like two-dimensional, they're multi-dimensional. That's what an archetype is. It's like a multi-dimensional facet of consciousness, a mystery. And the more archetypes you decode inside your being, the more you rise to the Buddhic plane. And you realize that everything, the light is behind everything. And then the Buddhic plane starts to come through you. And then the archetypes you no longer kind of need to think about them, because your contemplation expands and you begin to experience higher states called absorption, where you're just filled with light. You're just filled with love. And it doesn't even form images anymore. doesn't form archetypes. You know, it's just this cosmic love, these higher states. So I wanted to give you a kind of idea of like this journey that we can take through life that we are on, and the magic of contemplation, you know, because that contemplation leads us through insights and then epiphanies and breakthroughs into this field of merging, you know, where we realize that even though everything differentiates as it comes down into the form, you know, and into our mind, there's higher levels in which things are undifferentiated, in which they are unified, and they're unified in diversity. That's the real insight we have. So we don't just merge into this soup, you know. We actually experience the merging as it's occurring, but we also experience the differentiation as it comes, and it comes right down into our life and our mind. And it's a really epic journey. But the art of contemplation is key. And it's something I really recommend that you learn. It's a very simple thing to learn. And you can explore it through my little book, The Art of Contemplation. Very little, simple book, easily found on the internet. So, thank you. I hope that was inspiring. It's nice to think about these things and contemplate them.